During the 1990s, the Tour of Romandie was the ideal test for doped monsters like Tony Rominger, Abraham Alano or Laurent Jalabert to prepare for the Giro d'Italia, a trend that mutated over the following 2 decades, allowing other spawn like Tugboat Hamilton, Santiago Botero or Christopher Froome to prepare for the Tour de France. However, since this Swiss competition was cancelled due to COVID-19 in 2020, it has lost prestige and has seen a certain decline in the quality of participants, with winners including a 36-year-old Welsh alcoholic, a guy competing without a nationality, and a gregario from Team Dracula Gianetti. This trend has been repeated in the 2024 edition, but nevertheless, in this season of aliens tearing apart the rest of the riders as if they were simple one-of-one goblins from the popular card game Magic the Gathering, a restoration of competitive equality and the appearance of new monsters on the scene makes for a breath of fresh air. And, as in the case of the Vuelta al País Vasco, after the fall of the Anchovy and the Skier and Focusin, it makes the races a spectacle of entertainment worth watching. There was a certain uncertainty about knowing who was going to win, and all this despite a somewhat predictable and bordering on garbage route offered by the organisation. Richard Carapaz was a Swiss cyclist of the 1990s whom very few remember, as he only managed 1 victory as a professional, and that in a German village race, whilst in the ranks of the post-Swiss team of the doping one-hit wonder Roland Meyer. However, Richard managed to thrive extremely well in the Swiss Federation, praising those swindlers of the Lausanne laboratory who hid Lance Armstrong's positive for EPO in the 2001 Tour de Suisse. Therefore, since 2007, he's been in charge of the organisation of the Tour of Romandie, the same organisation that allowed the appearance of strange space beings like Ilnur Zakarin, or the same organisation that, since it began to collaborate with the organisation of the Tour de Suisse, already has a death on its palmares. Of course, without any blame or resignation or acceptance or self-criticism from Carapaz. Well, this man, despite living in a European tax haven, seems incapable of creating an attractive route for his race. He eliminates 1 day of competition in favour of a ridiculous prologue of, wait for it, 2 kilometres. In efforts of less than 3 minutes, someone who did very well was the partner of Marion Rousse. Perhaps he's looking to dock with a new team for next season, but he still could not achieve his first win of 2024. Instead, he was 2 seconds behind the surprising winner, the grandson of the pacer of legendary dopers like Francesco Moser, Joop Zoetemelk, Gianni Bugno or Eric Zabel, the Rondo with the moustache, Joop Zeelaert. We're talking now about his grandson, Michael Zeelaert, now in the ranks of the local Tudor team of Luigi's favourite classicist. And he wanted to imitate his manager, and so he took the win at almost 47 kilometres per hour, a great record. And of course, that was his first victory as a professional. That's the kind of race that Carapaz is offering us. After another victory from the much-improved Decathlon AG2R at the hands of Dorian Godon, thanks to the spectacular Van Rijssel bikes that you can also acquire to beat records of dopers of the 90s, in the second stage, we had the first mountainous finish of the race, with the ascent to Les Maricottes, a climb of only 7 kilometres, but very hard in its final 3K, with several ramps exceeding 10% average gradient. However, when there are no aliens racing, the riders tend to pedal at a slower rate, being tethered and herded up the final climb, keeping the tradition that UK Postal established in the previous decade. And perhaps because the rider who was herding them was a former Skyman, a non-nationality rider, Pavel Sivakov, spending just 3,316 kilojoules for 3 hours and 42 minutes. The climb was also paced by the current Greg LeMond. And then, with 3 kilometres to go, Jayco's Australian Luke Plapp jumped off in one of his now classic breakaways to glory in second-tier World Tour races. But next to him jumped a guy, almost unknown to the vast majority, the German Florian Lipowitz of Team Bora. He's of the same generation as the former Ineos rider, but with only 2 wins as a pro in a non-prestigious race with only 13 years of history, the Czech Tour. Lipowitz was presenting himself to the world like Beyoncé after giving birth to twins with liposuction included. A stellar performance by the German rider who, like those dopers of the 90s, was preparing for the Giro d'Italia in Romandie. Both of them caught the escapees Thibaut Nice and Andrea Vendrame, but the strong headwind allowed them to attach to their wheels, and the Belgian Radio Shack rider took his first World Tour win at just 21 years of age, yet another cyclocross genius to triumph on the road. However, we were left in awe of the wattage produced by Plapp and Lipowitz, 6.68 watts per kilo and 6.49 watts per kilo, and this for more than 20 minutes of effort, and considering that in the first kilometres of the climb they didn't go as quickly as they could have. Now, with no favourable wind, the differences with the rest of the riders did not exceed 15 seconds, so in the end, the first mountain stage was somewhat far from being decisive, if not a complete fiasco. The next day's 15-kilometre time trial was more spectacular. A short distance, but at least not as ridiculous as the first day. And despite the bad weather, Saunier Duval again swept a time trial this season, something which has already happened in the UAE Tour, in Tirreno Adriatico, in Paris-Nice, and now in Romandie. 3 of their riders in the top 4. The third win against the clock in 2024 for Brandon McNulty, and that out of 4 completed time trials. And all this on the same day that Isaac del Toro sentenced the Vuelta a Asturias. And Juan Ayuso, winner of the Vuelta al País Vasco, the leader of the GC in Switzerland for the second time in 2 years, as happened again in 2023, he failed again in the high mountains. The 4th stage of this Romandie was undoubtedly the key day of the edition, with up to 5 climbs in 150 kilometres and a finish in Les Ans, the pass where Alberto Contretrol won his first World Tour victory back in 2006, when he was still part of the Fat Balbas team. On this occasion, Sivakov shepherded the group at a much higher speed, with an expenditure of 3,758 kilojoules before the final climb, an intensity of 15.48 kilojoules per kilogram per hour for 3.5 hours. It meant that the distances in Les Ans, which is a much narrower pass than Les Maricottes, but with almost 14 kilometres of ascent, well, it meant the gaps were very wide. The Ineos team, with Castroviejo, Hayter, Arensman and a spectacular Egan Bernal, worked so that their leader Carlos Rodriguez could leave behind his compatriot Ayuso and avenge what happened in the Itzulia. And they succeeded. The pampered Spanish rider who wore the yellow jersey would once again drown in his own ego on a Swiss mountain, just days after declaring that working for Pogi in the Tour de France was something to behold. Clearly, Ayuso doesn't want to work for anyone, but first he has to prove himself in events like this. And despite Dracula Gianetti's apologies that his man was ill, the feeling of helplessness generated by the guy who didn't want to renew for Saunier Duval was absolute. Not so for the hero of the day, once again the German, Florian Lipowitz. It was quickly demonstrated that this Sputnik was undoubtedly the best climber of those present, easily getting away from the mediocre Enric Mas and his supposed leaders, Vlasov and Hindley, to reach the wheel of the Olympic champion Anne Rodriguez. As the stateless Russian did not lose any ground to Mas, Lipowitz did not dare to follow the Olympic champion in his classic mountain attack, one which looks like it will disintegrate the world and yet only opens small gaps. Richard Carapaz's tactics worked again with a big stage win for him, his first World Tour win in over a year. However, he almost didn't make it, because behind him, Lipowitz looked like he was desperately running to pick up his ex-partner at the airport, and with just 20 metres more, he would have taken the stage win, deprived evidently by the inaction of Rolf Aldag in the director's chair. And this just the week that Red Bull leaked the precious jersey that Lipowitz will wear next season after renewing his contract. The new German monster got the wings he needed to fly in the mountains and become, perhaps, the coveted anti-Pogacar for the mountains in the Giro d'Italia. Let's hope so. He and Rodriguez rode a brutal last 3 kilometres at over 6.5 watts per kilo, and that after an intense day. and had it not been for Bora's tactical disaster, he would have won the leader's yellow jersey, one which the Spaniard took. In the end, Rodriguez had no problems in neutralising Ayuso's timid attacks on the final day, displaying the classic pendular movements of Machin's teams. And despite the cold and rain, he was able to achieve his first victory in a World Tour race. A great year so far for the Ineos rider. And then there was the fresh new victory for Godon's Van Rijssel, which of course is triumphant thanks to its wonderful brakes, saddle and cranks. Vlasov took advantage of his good time trial to finish second, ahead of Lipowitz, who will still have to improve his time trial performance, but he has shown, no doubt, he has the body and a winning mentality. Primoz will be proud. In only 5 months at Bora, he has already created an anti-Pogi. Now let's see how he does in Italy.